Morning, good afternoon, good evening. People have often argued that why are some of our African leaders rigging elections, particularly our Zimbabwean leaders? Well, if you have been in power 44 years, as people like Mnangagwa have done, first during Mugabe's tenure, and then he took over. Giving up power is really difficult. And there's a report that in Senegal, that country recently elected a young president, there after the incumbent tried to hang on. Apparently, the incumbent lost. And now there are reports that the new president has just arrested the former president, accused of looting. Let's just listen quickly to the story.
Senegal. The former president of Senegal, Macky Sall, has been arrested by Bassirou Diomaye Faye, the new president of Senegal, the young president of Senegal. According to reports, the former president stole some monies when he was in governance. According to reports, Macky Sall stole 9 billion US dollars from government coffers when he was the president of Senegal and deposited this amount of money in about 113 different bank accounts. And he also built a hospital in Paris called Johanna Marian-Dor Hospital. He also built a hotel in Paris, and he named the hospital after his grandmother, Johanna. Yes, that is the development coming from Senegal. So he has been arrested and he will be tried. When found guilty, he will be in prison. And this is what is supposed to be done to all the outgone presidents, so that anybody that has stolen the taxpayers' money should be arrested. So that's the current development from Senegal.
Well, that is the very thing that people like Mnangagwa would fear. When they've been in power for 44 years now and counting, how much he looted is it's not clear, but there's no doubt that it will be a big fortune. He has had a lot of time to loot. And he has got other things to answer for. In his case, he was heavily involved in the Kukurawundi massacre, 1983 to 1987. Then he was also, by his own admission, involved in the electoral coup of 2008. He is the one who stopped the ZEC counting and announcing the results and took over. And he went on to recount only 5 million votes, but it took him 6 weeks. And we all know, of course, during those 6 weeks what was happening. Morgan Tsvangirai, although he had won that election, his votes were reduced to a respectable 47%, just enough to force a runoff. And Mnangagwa was involved in the runoff, and it was one of the most violent election in Zimbabwe's history. The wanton violence was unreal. And then he was also involved in the coup in 2017. And most recently, Mnangagwa rigged the 2023 elections. And this time, not even SADC election observers or the AU election observers could turn a blind eye to it. They both condemned it. The one ally that Mnangagwa had was South Africa. As I've said before, South Africa is holding their elections, and voting is on the 29th of May. South African elections, ever since the end of apartheid in 1994, have been free, fair, and credible. And this, it looks like it's not going to be an exception to that. These elections are free, fair, and credible. This is just a video of one of the opposition parties in South Africa, EFF, driving through one of the towns in KwaZulu-Natal. Well, that was impressive. In Zimbabwe, the opposition would have found themselves being constantly harassed by the regime. As far as I've heard myself, I cannot report of any incident in which the police in any way interfered with the opposition's campaigns or were involved in the violence. There was a video the other day of EFF supporters fighting ANC supporters, but that was supporters themselves fighting each other. And in Zimbabwe, the normal thing
Senegal.
would be
The former president of Senegal, Macky Sall, has been arrested by Bassirou Diomaye Faye.
Excuse me.
The latest coming from
the problem there is that the elections have been free, fair, and credible again and again since 1994. So we are looking at 30 years of free, fair, and credible elections in South Africa, which is a good thing. These ones look like they are going to be free, fair, and credible. I think the interesting thing for people like myself is that the ANC government in South Africa has been very supportive of Zanu PF. And in 2022, the party had its Congress, at which they publicly announced that they would not allow regime change in Zimbabwe. I think we all know what that was meant. They knew Zanu PF had a history of rigging elections. They didn't care about that. What they were saying to Zanu PF is even if they rig the elections, they will endorse them because they will not allow regime change in Zimbabwe. The main problem has been that South Africa has had problems of its own. ANC has had problems of its own. And they've been told, in certain terms, that if South Africa was to let Zimbabwe change, South Africans themselves would be tempted to seek change in South Africa. So it was in the interest of ANC to keep Zanu PF in power. But South Africa ANC government has turned out to be corrupt, incompetent, and the way they've run down that country in the last 30 years speaks volumes for itself. And so the close association between the ANC and Zanu PF has been linked in that regard. Is ANC going to run down South Africa the way Zanu PF has run down Zimbabwe? And then on the political front, ANC has publicly propped up Zanu PF, which has not helped ANC itself. As much as there's been democracy in South Africa these last 30 years, the people have remained faithful to ANC. But this year, it looks like South Africans are really willing to take up the challenge and hold ANC to account. There is a good chance that ANC will get a bloody nose on the 29th of May. If that was to happen, it will be a positive thing for Zimbabwe, because I think it will finally send a clear message to South Africa, the ANC, that they cannot prop up a corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical regime in Zimbabwe just for their selfish political ends. That will mean a lot for Zimbabwe, because without South Africa's ANC government propping up Zanu PF, Zanu PF will come under increasing pressure to hold free, fair, and credible elections. And this brings us back to this story of the former president of Senegal being arrested. Mnangagwa fears that if Zanu PF was to lose power, he himself may find himself being arrested. God knows his criminal activity speaks for itself. But we can't hold the whole nation to ransom because somebody was corrupt, incompetent, and committed serious human rights abuses, including murder. This is what we are talking about here. And I really seriously looking forward to 29th May. The countdown of South Africa's elections has started. And whatever happens on that day could mark the beginning of the end of the Zanu PF dictatorship. And that is something to look forward to for the people of Zimbabwe. Thank you very much for listening and have a good day.